Oh, hello and welcome to What Are We Talking About with Jamie Jakes. I am him, and today I'm going to go over my top 10 sleepers in fantasy football. We're going to go based off consensus ADP, which is average draft position across all the platforms, and we're going to talk about guys that are going in the 10th round or later who I think are absolute smash values that you need to be putting in your queue once you get to that 8th and 9th round, so you don't forget to draft these guys. Number one honorable mention, Caleb Williams, going 9-12 at the moment, so at the very end of the 9th round. Got to throw him in here. What if he's just Andrew Luck? I think he might be Andrew Luck with better wheels. He looks a lot more athletic than I was expecting him to look. We'll see what happens when we've got starting defensive tackles, defensive ends chasing him. I think he's going to run for a lot of yards this year. His pocket presence would indicate that he's got at least that kind of Aaron Rodgers style of rushing ability, and I think he's going to be more likely to use it in this offense. So Caleb Williams, I think, is a great value. I don't want to talk about him too much because it's cheating, so we're going to go on to the number two. Wide receiver, 49, Brian Thomas. Day one, he was running with the ones. He was actually running ahead of Christian Kirk in preseason. I think that is a little bit of smoke and mirrors. I think they wanted to get the rookie out there, the new guys out there with Christian Kirk sitting on the sidelines. And after the game, he did have a little bit of a calf pop-up, Christian Kirk did. So I think that is maybe the reason he was held out. Maybe he was feeling not so great before then and tried to test it out, didn't really feel great, and now we're waiting for him to get back on the practice field. In that meantime, Brian Thomas is making a name for himself over there in Jacksonville. He looked great in the preseason, and I expect him to have a potential to have like a top 24 fantasy football season from the wide receiver role. Calvin Ridley, who he's basically replacing in this offense, had over 1,000 yards last season, and he didn't look that great doing it. I think Brian Thomas could be an elevation over that, and Trevor Lawrence can support elite wide receivers. He kind of gets poo-pooed for whatever reason in the league, but the guy has thrown for over 4,000 yards multiple times in his short career, and you don't even have to count that Urban Meyer year because we all know what of a joke that was. Trevor Lawrence is a dude. He was kind of that Caleb Williams style prospect coming out of college, and I think he's going to continue to progress. For guys even like Matt Stafford, it wasn't super smooth to start their career, and they kind of matured in their third, fourth years and got re-signed by the team. Was really controversial back then, ended up being a pretty smart decision in hindsight for the Lions. So I think Brian Thomas, sky's the limit for him. He could overtake Christian Kirk and be that number one overall in this offense. We'll see if that happens. I think Christian Kirk is going to be the number one, but getting Brian Thomas at wide receiver 49 when he's just going to be a top 36 wide receiver day one, easy peasy, drafted all the time. Next player on the list, running back 37 will be Gus Edwards, and we hear a lot of talk about Kamani Vidal and him taking over as a 6th-round rookie throwaway draft pick for a team who already brought in 2 superstar veteran running backs to the team. They are going to run the ball, and they've indicated that by bringing those veterans in at the running back position, and they booted out their 2 best wide receivers. I think with the foot injury with Justin Herbert, that is something that maybe would indicate that they're going to run the ball even more, scramble even less. With this foot injury, sounds like it's not going to be an issue for him. So maybe I'm reading a little bit too much into that, but it is something to note that Herbert's got a little bit of a foot, which would be better for the fantasy football performances of their running backs in most cases. This run scheme with Kamani Vidal getting the handoffs looks incredible. That was one of the big metrics that this Chargers team failed at last year, was yards before contact. They just didn't have a good scheme. They didn't have good blocking. And now it seems like that Harbaugh just came into the room, kind of like what he did with Blake Corum in Michigan, just snapped his fingers, and I think we're going to have 2 elite running backs. Not to spoil anything later on, I think we're going to have 2 elite running backs in this offense. I don't think either of them is going to be Kamani Vidal. Next on the list at wide receiver 50, we've got Khalil Shakir. This is a guy, I'll be honest, I've been way too low on all preseason. Curtis Samuel now goes down with a turf toe injury. We don't know how long he'll be out. Definitely will be out. Very likely will be out for the remainder of camp, remainder of preseason. Was going to open the door wide open for Khalil Shakir, who was already maybe starting over Curtis Samuel on this team, the way they used them in the first preseason game when all the stars were on the field. Last year, his second year, he had 611 receiving yards, so he's primed for that year 3 style breakout in this Josh Allen run offense. Obviously, if you can be the number 1, number 2 target on the team, you are going to be thrusted so high up in fantasy football production because Josh Allen is just that style of guy. He's just going to throw for 4,500 yards every single season and run for like 600 to 800 every single season. That's why he's the number one quarterback every single year. And you're getting maybe one of his favorite targets this year. What if it does work out? Wide receiver 50 could be top 12 this year. I mean, that's not crazy to say. He also did really wow me in preseason. I tried not to read into it too much, but just the burst and the speed he showed surprised me. I kind of had a double take, like, oh, who was that? Was that? Yeah, that was Khalil Shakir, who had that kind of speed and that bend around the corner to really extend plays, get yards after the catch. I was really, really impressed with how he looked. Granted, we don't know exactly who was covering him on those plays sometimes. So take it for a grain of salt. But regardless, wide receiver 50, I think is great value here. The next wide receiver on the list, wide receiver 53, he is in a really muddy wide receiver room, and that's why he's going this low. Romeo Doubs. It was reported in camp by Aaron Rodgers back in the day that Romeo Doubs was the guy. Christian Watson was kind of the number 2 so far in camp, and that kind of played out. Both of them have really struggled with injuries. Even with those injuries last year, Romeo Doubs finished wide receiver 37. It's the same situation this year. It's the same players in the locker room. I get it. Jaden Reed and Wicks have another year of experience, but so does Doubs. He is a young man himself. He's still on his rookie contract, for goodness sakes. If Jordan Love is what he was last season, this season, Romeo Doubs, 37 is his floor in terms of wide receiver. And you get him at 53, it's just an evaluation. Doesn't make any sense to me. He's been healthy, as far as we know, all preseason. I think Romeo Doubs is an absolute smash value at 53 and a guy we've let fall way too far in the fantasy football community. Speaking of guys who are falling way too far, not too long ago, this guy had a QB5 season. He is now going QB20, and that's Matt Stafford for the Rams. And I think we all know the reason for this is injury concern. He's had a couple of injuries the past 2 years. Number one, he's a tough guy. I mean, we all remember that classic clip with the Lions where he dislocates his shoulder, pops it back into place, says, oh, I can play. You get like a timeout or like a penalty or some crazy sequence on the football field. NFL had it mic'd up and basically popped the shoulder back in. He runs back out there. He's like, I can throw. Throws a pass for a touchdown. Shoulder dislocates again. I think that was it for his season, but it was a great way to go out and pretty awesome for Lions fans. Anyways, his wide receivers are priced at premium wide receiver levels, and he's got 2 of them in Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. So if those players are priced at what they're priced at, like Puka Nacua is basically priced at like a 1,350 receiving yard season with like 8 touchdowns. That's what he's priced at. So if that's the case, Matt Stafford is going to have another 4,200, 4,300 passing yard season. In 2021, when he was QB5, 4,800 yards passing and 41 touchdowns. So that's a ceiling this year. Offense maybe going to be better. Who knows? Kyren Williams stays healthy. Cooper Kupp stays healthy. Puka Nacua is Puka Nacua again, which he will be. There's going to be an awesome offense. And the only thing that will really get in your way is injury. But at QB20, you already have your number one guy. And on that note, if you are in the back part of the first round, like 111, 112, and you get Puka Nacua, which I think is a great pick to pick there, I'll take him right after Garrett Wilson. If Garrett Wilson's drafted, I'll take Puka Nacua every single time. I think reaching on Matt Stafford for a round or two, especially in your home leagues, you get that Puka Nacua, Matt Stafford stack. That could be something that could absolutely dominate through your fantasy football playoffs. So draft Matt Stafford as your number 2. And hell, if you just miss out on the quarterback position in your home league, get your kicker, get your defense, then get Matt Stafford if you're in a little bit of a shallower roster league. Back to the running back position, back to LA. We're going to go with RB43, J.K. Dobbins. And an interesting part about this storyline that I think a lot of people are missing, of course, J.K. Dobbins had the Achilles, right? We all saw that. It was really early, though, last year. And Aaron Rodgers looks great. Kirk Cousins looks great. What if Achilles injuries are just not a thing anymore? They're not something that's really going to affect you. Maybe they figured out that surgery. And by all reports, it sounds like they definitely have. J.K. Dobbins was healthier to start this preseason than Gus Edwards was. And I think that's an interesting note to make, just because what if J.K. Dobbins is just the running back 1 on this team day 1, or running back 1A on this team day 1, because Gus Edwards is just a little bit hampered by his injury. This reminds me a lot of the Dalvin Cook Breece Hall situation from last year. And of course, there are confounding factors. I think we all know there are different factors involved here, but I was really excited to see how Dalvin Cook would do in this offense as they were kind of getting Breece Hall rolling. And then I looked one day and I was like, oh, Breece Hall just got activated from the PUP. Dalvin Cook had shoulder surgery last year. He's still on PUP. Uh-oh. It's just going to be the Breece Hall show, and they're going to get somebody else in the rotation in New York, and that's exactly what happened. Very different situation here, but I can see the same thing kind of working out here. J.K. Dobbins is a rookie, was RB22, so we know that's in the cards for him. That's an outcome. That's potential outcome for him. So get him at RB43, and that is, by the way, the only year he was healthy for his whole season. So that's why you're getting a discount on him. He's injured, I guess, but 25 years old, maybe got a really good Achilles surgery done. Maybe he comes back, seems to be highly motivated, seems to be in great shape to start camp. So I have no problem taking both of these guys. I took them in a home league back-to-back just because I'm like, I went 0 RB. I think this could be on the level of like a Jahmyr Gibbs and a David Montgomery situation, in that they will both be startable guys. Guys sometimes you can start at the same time in a single week of fantasy football. And if one of them goes down, the other one's going to shine. I am still going to maintain that Kamani Vidal will be like an emergency back for this team, and it's going to be the J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards show. That's what they signed him for. And speaking of running backs, running back 44 right now, Mr. Rico Dowdle. There are a lot of indications coming from the front office and the coaching staff that Zeke will be the number one guy there on day one. In my opinion, with my eyes and based off camp reports, I think Zeke is totally washed. I think Rico Dowdle is the guy there. He's the number one there for sure. We've got weird reports out of camp, but we always get weird reports out of camp from random Cowboys executives who just talk into a microphone for no reason. I'm not convinced that they really know what they're talking about, nor do they have the ability to actually make those decisions. McCarthy's coaching for his job. This team needs to win now. Let's be real. From an organizational standpoint, this team needs to win now, and it's going to get old really fast if they keep on trotting out Zeke to get a yard and a half per carry when they got Rico Dowdle sitting on the bench. They got to re-sign CD. We'll see if that happens before the season. They got to re-sign. I don't think they're going to re-sign Dak. Let's be real. So they're going to have Trey Lance as their starting quarterback next year. They need to win now, and I think it's become very apparent very quickly that Dowdle's going to be the guy, and Zeke's going to be the number two, maybe to sell some jerseys. I really do believe that. And if that is the case, RB44 value is an absolute smash value. But if it's not the case, you still got a handcuff back or a number two breather back for an aging starter on a high-powered Cowboys offense. So the touchdowns will be there, even if he's not the starter on this team. You're basically buying him at his absolute floor. You're getting him at a discounted handcuff back value, and he could just be the starter on the team. Same thing with Gus, same thing with J.K. Dobbins. Just draft Dowdle at 44. Getting back some more QBs. QB 21, Deshaun Watson, of course, had a bad season last year, had the shoulder injury. They have upgraded the offense again for him. They got Amari Cooper. Now they have Jerry Jeudy on this offense. David Njoku has a little bit of a lower extremity thing going on. We have no idea what it is. Doesn't sound like it's going to be serious. Doesn't even sound like he's week to week. Sounds like he's just resting because he's a G, and he's going to be catching a lot of passes from Deshaun Watson this year. I think this offense really gained an identity this year, and now they have a new offensive coordinator who is the offensive coordinator for Josh Allen, QB1, okay? I'm not comparing the two, but Deshaun Watson will have a good, stable rushing floor. He's going to run the ball. You can't take that out of Deshaun. Even if you tried, that's kind of been the problem the whole time. He's going to run the football a lot, and he's going to scramble a lot. That's just something that he does. What if he's just year 4 post-scandal breakout season like Mike Vick? Like we've seen it before. He was QB5, I believe, 3 years in a row, back to back to back to back. QB5, QB5, QB5 in fantasy football in 4-point passing leagues. I could see that happening again. That is his ceiling. You're getting him at 21. And even if he stinks at passing, he's still going to run the ball enough to be good enough for you at the value you're getting him. Again, could be a number 2, could be a emergency quarterback. Like if you go heavy Cleveland Browns to start with Deshaun Watson and you didn't get a QB for whatever reason in your home league, just get Deshaun Watson. You'll be fine. Getting a tight end in the mix here. Tyler Conk, currently tight end 18. 18, and this is entirely based off Rodgers, right? Rodgers loves his tight ends. Conklin's been good, by the way, even with horrible quarterback play. Tyler Conklin's been good. So this year he's going at tight end 18. Last year he finished at tight end 18 with an unwatchable offense. So if you missed it, I don't blame you. He was heavily involved. So you're buying him at his floor. If Aaron Rodgers ends up being Zach Wilson this year, you're going to get your value on Tyler Conklin at tight end 18. I think fading the tight end position early on, especially in your home drafts, is an entirely viable strategy this year because Tyler Conklin's going undrafted in a lot of these leagues. So if a guy like Evan Ingram, Jake Ferguson, or David Njoku doesn't fall to you, just wait and get one of these late guys. I think Tyler Conklin's the guy to get in this range. I think Noah Fant is another great option if you're in a really sharp league. But let's get back to Rodgers. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but one of the COVID years, one of the MVP years for Rodgers, he had a tight end named Robert Tonyan, who is still in the league. He's no longer relevant whatsoever in fantasy football. He ended up being Bob Tonyan ended up being tight end 3 that year in fantasy football. And I think I think Tyler Conklin's way better than Tonyan was. I think the ceiling is so much higher for Tyler Conklin in this offense. Aaron Rodgers throws to 3 main guys. It's going to be Garrett Wilson, it's going to be Breece Hall, and it's going to be Tyler Conklin will be the number 3 target on this team, I think. So draft him as much as you possibly can. Hopefully you're in those deeper leagues. If you're in a dynasty league, get him. He's still pretty young. And in best ball, he's just like a no-brainer. Just reach on him. Just get him around ahead of time every single time if you need a second or third tight end or a first tight end on your roster. I'm even like higher than him on Freiermuth at this point. Like I just love Tyler Conklin. Don't get me started on Tyler Conklin. Getting towards the end here, but I think a guy who could also burst on the scene could just wow us all and be a big surprise. It's going to be Xavier Legette. He had an amazing breakout season his last year with South Carolina, and that's the big concern about him. He had 0 college production before then. Maybe that's what he said, the offensive coordinator is the real reason it really worked his last year. Maybe Spencer Rattler had a little bit to do about it. Sounds like he's playing pretty well as well. So maybe he just got in a good situation, good quarterback his last year in college. This kid also had a really, really tough life. He had his parents die, and I think that would have ended a lot of other people's careers in football. But for whatever reason, he was able to overcome it, and I think that shows a lot of tenacity out of him, but it also might be a reason why it took him to break out so long. Maybe wasn't in the right space mentally. Maybe he wasn't studying his plays. Maybe he wasn't getting those workouts in. And that last year, he kind of had an awakening. He's like, I'm going to make it to the NFL. And he just snapped his fingers and he did. Jonathan Mingo over there in Carolina as well. He was running with the 2s and like the 3s in preseason. So he's ahead of him in the depth chart right now. I think that's all Fagays. Deontay Johnson had a little bit of a groin injury. Sounds like he's back at practice. So that's, bad news for Xavier Legette in terms of like how much practice he's getting, because Legette did have a little bit of an ankle injury earlier on in camp. I'm not concerned about the injury. I'm not concerned about Xavier Legette's production really at all. If you need some depth in the wide receiver position, wide receiver 66, even for the sake of trade bait, he could just run with the ones from day one. If that's the case, wide receiver 66 is not going to be what his floor is. If that's the case, his floor will be top 36 wide receiver and his ceiling will be top 12. He's just that explosive. Look, turn on his film from South Carolina his last year. There's a lot of plays in there you go like, whoa, like you definitely have some things to work on here and there, but you see some stuff and you're like, oh, that's not what I'm used to seeing in a college football field. And I think Xavier Legette can do it in the pros. So we'll see. But wide receiver 66 doesn't pan out. If he's not a starter week 1, just drop him for Jacob Cowing or whoever the big guy will be. Johnny Wilson, Andre Yosevich, guys that'll definitely be undrafted in your leagues. There's some like 3 deep dark sleepers for you. If you want to see like a deep dark sleeper episode, like rounds 15 to like 18, or like the rest of like the draftable players, let me know in the comment section, because I'm only doing that video if people watch. I would love to do it, but I'm only doing it if people watch it. And last guy on the list, Josh Downs, at a very nice ADP of wide receiver 69. He does have, the reason he is this low, he was pretty low before this, but the reason he's this low His high ankle sprain sounded like it wasn't great. It sounded like it was like potentially season ending, like a pretty scary scene from what it sounded like the reports were. But he's been cleared of any major injuries. He might be ready to practice. He might be ready to play week 1 if they need him. And I think he is going to just be the number 2 on Indianapolis this year. I don't think A.D. Mitchell is going to take over. Doesn't seem like the team is expecting or holding their breath for him to take over in the wide receiver position. So I think it's just going to be Michael Pittman, and I think it's going to be Josh Downs, and that's going to be about it in this offense. And then it's going to be Jonathan Taylor. It's going to be Anthony Richardson pounding the rock. Jelani Woods, another deep, dark sleeper on that offense for what it's worth. Josh Downs was wide receiver 46 last year, finished wide receiver 46, half PPR with Gardner Minshew as his quarterback. I think Anthony Richardson's floor as a passer is Gardner Minshew, in my opinion. And he's one of my guys, so maybe I'm a little bit overzealous with how excited I am about this offense, but I really think it's going to work. I'm fading A.D. Mitchell. I'm betting on Josh Downs. He had a great season as a rookie last year, and I think we're going to see a year 2 breakout despite his little setback with his ankle. But that ankle sprain, it's already built in. Like you're already at rock bottom. You're already buying at the dip. So that ankle injury is already calculated into this ADP. So before then, he was a little bit higher up. So I think Josh Downs as a late sleeper here is a great value if you need him. And those are my top 10 sleepers. Let me know if you want a deep, dark sleeper episode. Stay tuned. I'm going to reveal my rankings as my overall rankings. I think we're going to have like a whole fun show about it. So stay tuned for that and subscribe to the channel. Please leave a comment below. If you liked the video, share it with a friend. If you didn't like the video, share it with your enemy because they might appreciate it. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.